What if the dream of retiring in your 20s, 30s, or 40s isn't what it looks like on social media, and the actual number of people who do it is closer to a tiny fraction than a movement? According to widely cited breakdowns of retirement by age in the US, only about 1% of people in their early 40s are retired, around 2% in the late 40s, roughly 6% in early 50s, and about 11% by the late 50s, far smaller than the online narrative would suggest, even as videos, blogs, and forums make it feel common. Sources like Investopedia summarizes this reality while referencing surveys and analyses frequently attributed to outlets such as Motley Fool and Gallup, which together paint a clear picture. Early retirement is talked about a lot, lived by very few. Let's break it down. The FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, sounds simple on paper. Slash expenses, save and invest aggressively, and hit a number where work becomes optional. The headline rules are straightforward. The 25x rule, aim for a portfolio about 25 times annual expenses, and the 4% rule, withdraw about 4% in the first year and adjust for inflation. These ideas come from retirement research and have been popularized across personal finance education. But they were originally designed with a roughly 30-year retirement in mind, not 40, 50 years of drawdowns. That's a massive difference in risk and planning. Now, remember, definitions matter. Retired used to mean no earned income. Today, many who say they've retired early are still earning, consulting, freelancing, running small businesses, or creating content. That's not a gotcha, it's the point. The modern version is often about making work optional and flexible. Variants like Lean FIRE, tight budgets, Barista FIRE, part-time work with benefits, Coast FIRE, invest heavily early so later work only covers expenses, and Fat FIRE, higher spending targets, exist because different lifestyles and risk appetites need different plans. The goal isn't to be a monk, it's to gain control. So why does early retirement feel everywhere online when it's rare offline? Visibility and echo chambers. People who step away from traditional work have more time to post about it. Their stories get amplified on YouTube, podcasts, and blogs. If someone hangs out in FIRE communities, minimalism groups, and investing subreddits, the algorithm wraps them in a blanket of "it's happening." Meanwhile, the majority still working toward their 60s don't post much about spreadsheets and employer health plans. Let's talk numbers versus vibes. The national saving reality is a big speed bump. Over recent years, the US personal saving rate has hovered in the low single digits, think 3 to 6% most of the time, according to official statistics from the US Bureau of Economic Analysis. Some Federal Reserve commentary has even noted that post-pandemic data revisions show households saved less than initially thought, which tightens the baseline. FIRE math often assumes saving 20 to 50% or more. That mismatch explains a lot. It's not that the method is fake, it's that the average household saving rate won't get there without big changes to income or expenses. Here's another piece: longevity. Planning for a 30-year retirement starting in the mid-60s is different from planning for 40, 50 years starting in the 30s or 40s. Government health data shows life expectancy at age 65 adds roughly 2 decades on average, longer for women. Even modest improvements in longevity stretch the runway further. Longer retirements amplify sequence of returns risk, bad markets early in retirement hurt more, and healthcare inflation risk. That's a nudge towards semi-retirement for many. Work a little, keep benefits if possible, and let the portfolio compound longer. And then there's behavior. One more year syndrome is real. Someone hits a target like $900,000 and thinks, one more year for safety, then another. It's understandable. Compounding is addictive, and extra cushion feels good. But it can move the goalposts forever. The antidote is to define thresholds in advance, a target number, a minimum safe withdrawal rate, a healthcare plan, and a rules-based trigger. Make the decision boring and pre-committed so fear doesn't keep rewriting the ending. Let's dig into the math with simple language. Suppose annual spending is $50,000. Using the 25x rule, the independence number is around $1.25 million. At a 4% initial withdrawal, that produces about $50,000 in year one. If a household earns $150,000 and saves 60%, $90,000, it might hit that target in roughly a decade plus, depending on returns and raises. But if saving is 10 to 15%, which looks more like national norms, the timeline drifts toward traditional retirement ages unless income soars or spending drops hard. That's not a moral judgment, it's a math story. Healthcare is the silent boss. Employer coverage and Medicare timing keep many attached to traditional work longer than they'd like. This is why Barista FIRE, part-time work that includes benefits, makes sense. It reduces portfolio drawdowns, cuts risk, and maintains coverage, especially important for families or anyone managing ongoing health needs. It's also a sanity boost. Fewer hours, more control, and less pressure on investments. Here's a subtle trap: survivorship bias. A lot of success stories come with tailwinds: high-paying careers, low fixed costs, family help, inheritances, or early financial education. That doesn't make the strategies invalid. It means copying the result without the same boosts can feel impossible. The repeatable parts are the ones that work across incomes, automate saving, keep fixed costs lean, invest in low-cost diversified funds, and steer career choices toward higher earning power or more enjoyable work, so motivation and consistency don't buckle. Now, let's talk about the 4% rule without jargon. It's not a promise, it's a historical model. It assumes a 30-year retirement with a specific mix of stocks and bonds. Stretch that to 50 years and the success rate drops in many long-horizon simulations. This is why people tightening the withdrawal rate to 3.5% for very early retirement isn't fear, it's prudence. And it's why many retirees keep a side income. It acts like a throttle during bad markets and smooths out the ride. So where does that leave anyone who still wants this? The middle path is the most practical. Aim for flexible independence, not a cliff jump. Think in stages. First, knock out high-interest debt. Build an emergency fund that covers real life. Max retirement accounts in strong earning years. Compress fixed costs so saving is automatic, not willpower-based. Consider a career pivot that pays well enough but doesn't drain energy. If the portfolio isn't quite ready, a part-time season can bridge healthcare, pad the numbers, and keep skills sharp. Let's tie it back to feelings, not just formulas. The attraction of FIRE isn't really about never working. Most people feel aimless without purpose. It's about control, working on things that feel meaningful at a pace that lets life breathe. Think of financial independence as a shock absorber. A small buffer smooths potholes. A year of expenses makes speed bumps nothing. A 25x portfolio turns most roads into highways. The bigger the shock absorber, the calmer the ride. A quick reality check before we close part 1. The spotlight is bright, but the percentages are small. National savings patterns don't support mass early retirements. Longevity and healthcare tilt the board. And yet, the principles still work. Spend less than income, invest consistently, and buy back time in chunks. The target might shift from retire at 35 to feel free by 35. That shift changes everything because it's driven by habits that are doable for far more people than the extreme version. Here's the summary so far. Early retirement as a full stop is rare. Flexible independence, where work is optional, part-time, seasonal, or self-directed, is far more common and often more sustainable. The big levers are savings rate, income growth, fixed cost control, and healthcare strategy. The big mindset is accepting that freedom can arrive gradually, not just all at once. In part 2, we'll get tactical. We'll map age-based benchmarks that don't feel like mission impossible, compare FIRE variants and who they fit, walk through safe withdrawal thinking for longer time horizons, outline pre-65 healthcare options, and give practical scripts to beat one more year syndrome without blowing up peace of mind. For now, keep the goal simple. Build a life where money anxiety gets quieter each year, and choose work because it's interesting, not because it's the only option. Quick gut check before we dive in. Early retirement as a full stop is rare, but building enough freedom to choose how and when to work is absolutely within reach for many. especially with a plan that's practical, flexible, and grounded in data from credible sources like government statistics and mainstream finance research. In other words, aim for financial independence in stages, not a single cliff jump, and the path becomes a lot more realistic and less stressful. Let's break it down with a roadmap that balances math with real life. First, clarity beats hype. The numbers often quoted in personal finance coverage show that only a sliver of people in their 40s are actually retired. And even in the early 50s, it's still a small minority, which aligns with what large financial education sites and national polling have summarized over the last few years. At the same time, the national personal saving rate has typically sat in the low single digits in recent years, according to official economic data, which explains why the Save 50% FIRE model is so uncommon in the wild. That's not pessimism, it's context that pushes the plan toward flexible independence with part-time or seasonal work, rather than a hard stop decades before 65. Now remember, definitions are your friend. Financial independence simply means investment income and cash buffers can carry the bulk of expenses, so work becomes a choice, not a chain. The 25x rule, target around 25 years of expenses, and the 4% rule, start withdrawals around 4% in year 1, then adjust for inflation, are quick planning shortcuts based on historical research for roughly 30-year retirements. If the horizon is 40-50 years, many planners prefer nudging the starting withdrawal rate closer to 3 to 3.5%, which reduces the failure risk in longer simulations. This isn't about scaring anyone. It's just acknowledging that retirement starting in the 30s or 40s is a different animal than starting in the 60s, especially with healthcare and market volatility in the mix. Let's talk versions, because the flavor matters. Lean FIRE is about keeping expenses low enough to make the math easy, which is powerful but can feel restrictive for some. Fat FIRE targets a higher lifestyle budget, which requires bigger numbers but often pairs well with high-earning careers. Barista FIRE keeps part-time income and benefits in play, reducing withdrawal pressure and smoothing healthcare costs. Coast FIRE front-loads investing early. Later, earned income only needs to cover living costs while the portfolio compounds toward traditional retirement. The best version is the one that keeps consistency high and stress low. To make this concrete, let's run a simple thought experiment. Say annual spending is $50,000. The 25x rule would point to a target around $1.25 million. At a 4% initial withdrawal, that produces roughly $50,000 in year 1. But if someone wants a longer runway or is worried about market swings, a 3.5% start means aiming closer to $1.43 million for the same spending. If a household earns $150,000 and saves 60%, $90,000, the target could be reachable in about a decade plus, depending on market returns and pay growth. If the saving rate is 10-15%, closer to the national norms, it's more like a traditional retirement timeline unless expenses shrink or income jumps. These illustrations are aligned with how mainstream personal finance outlets explain the math. They aren't promises, just guideposts. Healthcare is the hidden boss battle. For many, employer coverage and Medicare timing are the biggest anchors keeping a traditional job in place longer than they'd like. That's why a transition season with part-time work can be a smart middle step. It reduces reliance on portfolio withdrawals, keeps access to benefits, and buys crucial compounding time. Even many early retirees still earn by consulting or creating, because optional income is both a safety net and, for a lot of people, actually fun. Let's tackle the one more year syndrome with a simple checklist. Decide in advance, a target number, a draw rate, 4% for around 30 years, lower for longer horizons, a healthcare plan, and what enough means in lifestyle terms. Then set a trigger date and agree on an exit plan that includes a review of market conditions and cash buffers. If markets are ugly, use a staggered approach. Shift to a lighter workload first, or delay full draws until a bounce. Think of it like landing a plane. Sometimes the right move is a smooth glide path, not a hard drop. Now for practical, age-based markers that feel manageable. In the 20s, attack high-interest debt. build a basic emergency fund, and automate investing into low-cost index funds or retirement accounts. The win here isn't perfection, it's habit formation and time in the market. In the 30s, push savings rate when earnings rise and keep fixed costs lean. Housing and cars are the big levers. In the 40s, focus on resilience, bigger buffers, better insurance, and clear rules for drawdowns if planning an early exit. In the 50s, take advantage of catch-up contributions and fine-tune sequence of returns defenses, more cash, flexible spending rules if stepping back early is still on the table. These steps echo the mainstream guidance from retirement planning publications and financial education portals: strong basics, automated saving, diversified investing, and age-appropriate risk management. Here's a simple guardrail system that works well for long horizons. Set a cash cushion of 12 to 24 months of expenses before any early retirement. Use dynamic withdrawals. In down markets, trim spending slightly or pause discretionary items. In strong markets, allow modest raises. Rebalance annually so the portfolio doesn't drift too stock-heavy after big runs. For many, even a small side income, say $1,000 to $2,000 a month, dramatically reduces sequence risk and lets the portfolio breathe during rough patches. This mirrors what many credible advisors suggest for longer retirement periods. Combine conservative withdrawal starts with flexible spending and periodic rebalancing. Let's touch on mindset, because numbers alone don't carry the finish line. The average person doesn't fail FIRE because they can't do math. They stop because the lifestyle asks for real trade-offs. That's why it's better to design a plan that someone actually wants to live. If that means spending more on travel and cutting somewhere else, do it. If that means working seasonally or consulting in bursts, build around it. The most sustainable plan is the one that fits personal energy and values, not just a spreadsheet target. Behavioral finance research and even surveys of new retirees often show that purpose, structure, and community matter as much as money for long-term satisfaction. A word on comparisons. The loudest early retirement stories can include advantages like high-paying fields, family support, or paid-off housing. That doesn't invalidate the strategy, but it does mean the average person shouldn't measure progress against someone else's head start. Better to track what can be controlled: savings rate, income growth, and fixed costs. The compounding edge comes from time and consistency, not perfection. And for many, hitting work optional beats chasing a dramatic calendar age. Now remember, the goalposts don't have to be extreme to be meaningful. Think in levels of freedom. Level 1, a 6 to 12 month emergency fund and no high interest debt. Level 2, annual savings rate above 25% with diversified investments. Level 3, Coast FIRE, invested enough that future work only needs to cover expenses. Level 4, Barista FIRE, portfolio plus part-time income covers the lifestyle while preserving benefits. Level 5, Full FIRE, portfolio alone supports spending with a conservative draw strategy. Moving one level up is a win. Sustaining the level for years is the bigger win. If the plan is being built from scratch today, here's a clean starting script. List all fixed costs and attack the top 2 line items, usually housing and transportation. Automate contributions right after payday into a broad, low-cost index fund mix. Add a small joy budget for fun so the saving plan doesn't implode later. Every raise or new income stream, direct half to savings before lifestyle creep catches it. Revisit healthcare, insurance, and taxes annually, because a few smart choices there can be worth thousands. This is the unsexy part that most reputable personal finance educators agree on, and it's exactly what works. A fast note on withdrawal math without getting lost in charts. The 4% rule came from historical testing with a 30-year horizon. For 40 to 50 years, consider starting around 3 to 3.5% and using flexible spending rules. If the portfolio gets a strong 3-year run, someone can grant themselves a permanent spending bump. If markets slump, hold steady or trim. The point isn't to guess the future, it's to build a system that adapts. Let's end with a view that keeps motivation high and pressure low. Early retirement is rare. Flexible independence is attainable. The combo that gets most people there is simple, repeatable, and boring in the best way. A higher savings rate than the national average, a thoughtful handle on fixed costs, steady investing in diversified funds, and a work design that trades grind for control. If the mind wants a clean finish line, set one. If life prefers a softer landing, take it. The real prize isn't a calendar age or a title, it's the ability to choose how time gets spent. Final takeaways for the next step. Start with the basics and automate them. Pick the FIRE variant that matches personality and risk tolerance. Use conservative withdrawal assumptions for longer horizons and layer in flexible spending rules. Don't ignore healthcare, plan around it. If one more year creeps in, negotiate with it. Reduce hours or step down, don't stall forever. Most of all, treat freedom like a muscle. Build it gradually, train it regularly, and let it carry the weight that money alone can't. And a closing thought, it's okay if the story ends with work that's chosen, not chased. That still counts as financial independence. It might even be the better version. More purpose, less pressure, and just enough structure to enjoy every day on one's own terms.